So sorry, Kathleen, to hear that. And please know our heart is with you, with your family and your community tonight. Thank you for sharing with us. I'm Monica Cabrera in New York. Thank you for being with me for our breaking news coverage of the shooting at this church in Texas. Our colleague Michael Holmes continues right now.
Breaking news.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Holmes. We are following several breaking stories this hour. President Donald Trump is on the longest trip to Asia by a US president in more than 25 years. He will be holding a news conference this hour with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and of course we will bring that to you live. But first, horror and disbelief in Texas after a shooter killed at least 26 worshippers during a Sunday church service outside of San Antonio. The 14-year-old daughter of the pastor among the dead. The suspect is 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly. He was found dead of a gunshot wound in his car after a brief chase. Now, he was discharged from the US Air Force for bad conduct over charges of assaulting his spouse and their child. The shooting happened in a small, tight-knit community of only a few hundred people. This is how some residents faced the terrible news.
Lost folks and be with us here as we learn to deal with this these days to come. I'm sorry.
We're also getting a glimpse of what the inside of the church looks like. This video was taken a week ago. It's another service, not the one in question. We don't know if any of the people you see here either were in the building at the time of the shooting. Here's the Texas governor.
As a state, we are dealing with the largest mass shooting in our state's history. There's so many families who've lost family members, fathers, mothers, sons, and daughters. The tragedy, of course, is worsened by the fact that it occurred in a church, a place of worship, where these people were innocently gunned down.
We're also learning more about how this tragedy unfolded.
At approximately 11:20 this morning, a suspect was seen at a Valero gas station in Sutherland Springs, Texas. He was dressed in all black. That suspect crossed the street to the church, exited his vehicle, and began firing at the church. That suspect then moved to the right side of the church and continued to fire. That suspect entered the church and continued to fire. As he exited the church, a local resident grabbed his rifle and engaged that suspect. The suspect dropped his rifle, which was a Ruger AR assault type rifle, and fled from the church. Our local citizen pursued the suspect at that time. A short time later, as law enforcement responded, that suspect, right at the Wilson, Guadalupe County line, he ran off the roadway and crashed out and was found deceased in his vehicle.
And our Ed Lavandera joins us now from Sutherland Springs. Ed, you know, we're learning more about what happened, but virtually nothing about the why so far. What have you been hearing?
Well, that motivation is what drew him to this church is still very much up in question. A couple of interesting things to point out. Kelly lives in the town of New Braunfels, which is about 40 miles away from this town here in Sutherland Springs. New Braunfels is just north of San Antonio. So why he would drive 40 miles and pick out this church is obviously something investigators are taking a much closer and deeper look into. And obviously whether or not he should have been able to legally purchase a gun is something that is in question as well tonight. As you mentioned, he was able to purchase this assault style rifle legally back in April of 2016. And so the question kind of becomes, he was released from the military on a bad conduct discharge, which is different from a dishonorable discharge, and he was accused and court-martialed and convicted of abusing his spouse and his child. So questions as to whether or not the conviction on those charges should have been able to disqualify him. But from according to sources that CNN has spoken with tonight, there was nothing that popped up in the background check that would have disqualified him from being able to get that weapon, apparently. So we'll continue to look closer into that, Michael. And that's one of the things that investigators also take taking a much closer look as they try to piece together what exactly the motivation was in this attack.
So Ed, just to expound on that a little bit more, he did do a background check. Nothing popped up. And for viewers who might be watching, is this because a domestic violence charge should have precluded him from owning a weapon under normal circumstances, and that didn't show up because it was a military procedure rather than in the civilian courts? Is that the thinking?
It's hard to fully kind of say this at this point. It's one of the things that we'll continue looking into, especially into tomorrow, as well as to whether exactly if it was because he was discharged for a bad conduct, that perhaps that might not have raised the flags and the warnings on that, or because a bad conduct discharge from the military is different from a dishonorable discharge. So whether or not that played into it, we just can't say at this point. We'll continue to ask questions about that, and obviously the questions about if you are convicted of this assault charge, how did that not pop up in the background check that would have been done theoretically when he purchased the weapon back in April of 2016?
Yeah, still a lot of questions. Ed Lavandera there on the ground for us in Texas. Thanks so much, Ed. All right, in Japan, President Trump sticking to his busy schedule on the first leg of a whirlwind tour of Asia. Still, he says his thoughts and prayers are with the victims of the Texas church shooting. He called the attack an act of evil in a place of sacred worship, but said Americans will do what they do best in times of tragedy.
We join hands, we lock arms, and through the tears and through the sadness, we stand strong, oh so strong. My administration will provide its full support to the great state of Texas and all local authorities investigating this horrible crime.
We are waiting for the President and the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to address the media any time now. Our Jim Acosta is in the room where that news conference will be held, and he's with us on the line. Jim, Mr. Abe and Mr. Trump profess to have a very close relationship, but they have a lot of differences on issues like trade and also on defense matters.
They really do, Michael, but this trip has already stirred